I am the executive producer of this webinar series and also of the upcoming documentary. And we are so grateful that you're here with us today. Nearly a year ago, Juliet and I, we set out to create a documentary that centers and amplifies the voices of Black autistic people. As a disability justice activist and as a Black disabled person, I see and know that the stories are often left out of mainstream narrative, films, just overall discussions of the Black autistic experience. So Julie and I, alongside with others, came together and wanted to produce this film that you see, we're in the early stages of it, but I'm really excited to put this together. And so this webinar series is part of that evolution. And I'll give it to Juliet to introduce herself.
Thank you, Tamika. Hi, everyone. I'm Juliet Romeo, the executive producer for #Autistic Out Loud. These webinars are more than just conversations. They're community spaces where we can deepen our understanding, share lived experiences, and continue building toward equity, visibility, and justice for Black autistic individuals and their families.
Each session that you will see in this webinar series, there's going to be 5 parts to it, and the 6th one will be where you'll be introduced to the main subjects of the film. But each session highlights the themes that's related to the film. So we're looking to explore these when it comes to education, employment, diagnoses, access to safety, and also we want to celebrate and show the joy in, I know they say Black autistic joy and resistance and the power of building a community. And so, and it's also acceptance. So today in this webinar series, you will or this webinar, you'll hear from autistic leaders, also parents, scholars, and community activists who are shaping what inclusion and disability justice looks like.
Yeah, so whether you're joining us as a self-advocate, an ally, a parent, a professional, or someone still learning, we welcome you. Thank you for showing up and leaning into this powerful dialogue. We invite you to listen deeply, ask questions, and share what you learn.
And this is, again, just the beginning of this project. I want to give a special thank you to Charlotte Batchelor, my friend and mentee, who I have a pleasure of knowing for some years now. She is the project coordinator, so she made all this possible. So I just definitely want to give her a shout out and thank you. And thank you to the attendees, the viewers, and also, of course, our panelists and moderator for being part of this #Autistic Out Loud journey. So I want to give it to another friend of mine, Heather Clark, who will be moderating this discussion.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. So I want to just say hi to all of our panelists. We have Ayana Davis, who is an autistic self-advocate like myself. I'm also a Black autistic self-advocate. And please let me know if I'm going too fast for the interpreters. I don't want to go too fast. We have Kenneth Mims, who is a professor and CEO of an autistic organization. And we have Camille Proctor, who is a mom and the co-founder of Color of Autism, which is a national organization to help support Black autistic children and their families. And I myself also work in the field of autistic self-advocacy and work in research and working with teachers and with families. And I want to also take the time to introduce our interpreters, Joshua Lane and Amber Graves, who are doing the fantastic work of doing the ASL interpretation for us. I really love the fact that Tamika, who put this, and Juliet, thank you so much for putting this wonderful organization, this wonderful webinar series together. Started out with talking about autistic joy. I think for so many of us who are autistic and who work as allies, parents, and community members with the autistic community, a lot of what we struggle with is health. And it's not because, for me as an autistic person, it's not necessarily because I'm autistic, but because of barriers to access to free health. So I think that's the question that I want to start with to all of the panelists. And I'm going to start with Ayana, because I know that you talk a lot about your autoimmune diseases, and I also have autoimmune diseases as well. So I would ask all of our panelists, what does health equity look like in the autistic community, especially when we think about the intersections, to look at our wonderful sister, Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, who talks about the intersection of how that is with the Black community. So for being Black and autistic, knowing that those two, being disabled, being autistic, and being Black, how do that work together to have access to health equity in the autistic community? What does that look like? Ayana, would you be able to answer that first?
Sure. Well, first, I do have 5 autoimmune diseases and a seizure disorder. So, which is common for a lot of autistic people.
Mhm.
But when we try to get like my MRIs and everything done, the neurologist, the white neurologist, they weren't really paying us any mind. It was hard for us to find like a Black neurologist up here in Westchester County.
Mhm.
And we really weren't treated fairly. Um, and with Black autistic children, for them to live their best quality of life, they need equal treatment like everybody else. But of course, it's going to look different for a Black autistic child than it does for a white autistic child. And I work in underserved communities with parents. And of course, it's going to look different for them because a lot of them, they go to clinics. And I feel like the doctors that work in those clinics, they don't care about the children. They just want to get them in and get them out. So, speaking with these parents, the amount of gaslighting and medical bias that they face is disgusting.
Mhm.
And for me, it feels like they kind of like let our children slip through the cracks and they set them up for failure on
Mhm.
purpose. Um, and being that so many times us as Black autistics are left out of the conversations about
Mhm.
autism unless we're starting them ourselves, and left out of research, we we're just behind on everything, so we're not going to get that equal treatment that everybody else gets. We have to look at systemic racism and ableism that's holding back the process as
Mhm.
well. So with and autism is still stigmatized in the Black community. So when the two meet, it sets back any progress that we've made. We need a Black autistic person, they've already experienced racism because they're Black.
Mhm.
A Black autistic person, they've already experienced ableism because they're autistic.
Mhm.
So, like, until those things are really faced, I don't feel like we're going to get the equality that we're entitled to.
Yeah, completely. Kenneth, would you like to take it next? Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me participate. Overall, this conversation is difficult, and it's challenging. When we start to look at health equity, there's systemic considerations, historical considerations as African Americans, relative to our social and economic position, as really being oppressed. And so when we take in consideration autism, and the challenge that this system has, understanding and being aware and being considerate, I guess, the roots of it is really from a capitalistic standpoint. It just it is what, it is what it is. It's just, it's very challenging, but I just, always say, what I discovered over my career is basically if you don't have access to quality healthcare and you don't have access to quality education, you're going to have a disadvantage receiving the appropriate support and treatment, for autism. And so simply if a child does not have quality education, they're not going to be in a situation where, you have teachers who care, you have a school system that cares, that's able to identify and support. And if you don't have access to appropriate healthcare, insurance, those things, access to appropriate pediatrician, fundamentally, you won't have the opportunity to get diagnosed and to get services and support. So there's some just, historical, systemic challenges that we face. And when you, put it in the perspective of autism and receiving, the appropriate support, diagnosis, and treatment, it just, it just makes it very challenging, for many, to get the support and for individuals to really reach their, fullest potential, throughout their life.
Yes, thank you. And Camille?
So I may say something unpopular, but I think it's a combination of things, and everyone has said those things. But I also think that we really need to, as a community, as a Black community, we really need to embrace the theory of autism. And what I mean is that there's autistic people, and that's one of the biggest hurdles, is just accepting people, right? Because if we could accept the diagnosis, then we could better advocate. But so much time is wasted on not being accepting of that diagnosis that we've lost services because our community wasn't quite there. And so I think now with this project, the documentary, and more people unmasking, I think that we are going to be able to have that collective that we can start to better advocate for services for everyone. And so that's just my take. I just think that overall, as a community, we really need to get on board with autism, because it's not going anywhere, and our people aren't going anywhere. I mean, and these are citizens. These are people that are part of our community. So, we always talk about support the Black community. Then we have to support the Black autistic community, because it's our community. That's what we're supposed to do.
I love that, Camille. I just want to add quickly, as somebody who is Black and autistic, I think that, there's been a lot of things said lately in the press by certain people who I won't name, about, statistics and why is this happening? Why is this happening in the Black community? But the fact of the matter is, 100 years ago, Granny had collected 100 spoons from every state. Right? And she could talk to you about those spoons from every state ad nauseum. Grandpa maybe collected pennies from every state, or coins, or stamps, or whatever. And that was the only thing he talked about. And he only ate a certain thing, but nobody talked about it. Those traits were not pathologized. We always talked about, that was grandpa, that was uncle, that was so-and-so. They only wore what they ate. They only ate what they ate. They only talked about their spoons. They only talked about their coins. They only talked their stamps. But now we pathologize those things in small children. And as somebody who works with teachers and who works educating teachers and doing this research specifically for Black children, to get out of that one line of thinking, it is accepting it and understanding that autistic people, autistic children, are naturally occurring part of the population, and they don't need treatment. I do agree with Ayana that there is so much medical gaslighting. And as a Black autistic woman, I've experienced it, right? Like going to the doctor, trying to get autoimmune diseases diagnosed, birthing two humans myself, and not feeling like what I'm saying is being taken seriously. Like you're being dramatic, or you're being what do they always say? Combative. They wouldn't say that to a white woman. But I think that this is something that without health, we can't access joy. And so breaking those barriers down is what's going to get us there. And what you're saying, Camille, is like acceptance. We got to get there as a Black community. And so that leads me to my next question. And Camille, I think you're ideal to answer it, because what you do with parents is so important. What role, actually, what are the barriers to diagnosis and support? And can you share, if you feel comfortable, an example of a personal story? And Camille, I think you're in an ideal position to answer this first. I'm going to say the question again. What do you feel are
some of the barriers?
Yeah, the barriers for diagnosis and support. And if you feel comfortable, can you share an example from your personal story?
Yeah, I can probably share my personal story, but some of the barriers, like I said, the barriers are you have a parent who sees something that maybe what they think is different. And so they start talking to family members and they go, oh, you know, Tony walks slow, Tony talks slow. And they blame everything on whoever Tony is, the invisible cousin. And so you're supposed to be basing your life off of cousin Tony, who is clearly autistic, but nobody has given Tony a diagnosis. So you sit and you wait. And you wait. And then finally, so that's one aspect. But then also you have parents who clearly see what the problem is and they're going to physicians and they're not getting a diagnosis. So and again, the social emotional part of giving birth to something that's not perfect. I didn't say being autistic is not perfect, but in a lot of people's brains, they cannot process that this person is different. So that's problematic. And I'll give you an example of my own personal story. I knew my son, I knew something was there. I didn't know what it was. I knew that he had repetitive behaviors. He had this Fisher Price house. He clicked the light on and off all day long. He was a late walker. He loved wheels. He was spinning. He was flapping. He wasn't talking. When I took him to the pediatrician, they said, oh, no, he's fine, because he made eye contact. No one paid attention to the fact that the only people he made eye contact with were women. And so this went on and on and on until I had to take him to a genetic doctor who we tested him, and they said he has 47 chromosomes instead of 46. That's one over. And in my opinion, typically that person is autistic, but it's a gray area. So it's not Fragile X. And she said it's just a gray area. And then from her diagnosis, I was able to get him into a developmental pediatrician the very next day, who then told me my son was in fact talking, but he was speaking in German. But that's another story all in itself. But the point is, you know, it shouldn't be this hard.
Right.
And it shouldn't have been that hard for someone like myself, who was educated, degree up and down. And I'm, you know, on a tour with him, you know, and so imagine for someone living in an underserved community that didn't have the means or doesn't have the means that I had at that time, it's even more difficult. And you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to tell you that in a lot of urban cities, whether it's Atlanta or Detroit, Atlanta doesn't even have any clinical or therapeutic services in Atlanta proper. I think Detroit has one. And you have in Detroit alone, there's 2,500 kids that qualify for services. And we live in a motor city, but nobody has a car, and their alternator is always broken down. And Tamika can nod her head to that. Everyone always has a broken alternator.
Texas is another area with a lot of urban because I have a very dear friend, and her daughter was born at Corpus of the Callosum. I don't know what it's called, the exact name, and no services.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to chime in.
Please do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the aspect of services. You know, well, first and foremost, you know, I look at this you know, as a shift in humanity or opportunity to shift in humanity, really to understand. I mean, we're still in an age and stage where we talk about our differences based upon the color of a skin, like black, white, so to move deeper, to a higher understanding, really based upon some science or neuroscience, it's an opportunity for us to move away. And so move away and advance culturally, spiritually, within our beliefs. So some of the barriers that we have culturally, is our beliefs, our spirituality, our religious systems, that does have to be addressed, historically, we just don't understand, we don't know, so, and how we process it and how we deal with it, with the diagnosis. Things are different, fortunately, things I would say are better in some aspects than 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. I have an older brother who passed away, but he was young when he was younger. He was undiagnosed, autistic. Looking back at it, he struggled transitioning into adulthood, as many individuals do. And he started, to transition to, well, always had, aspects of isolation, but then depression and then suicidal tendencies. And I lost him, maybe within about a year, to suicide. And so he went through his whole life from, say, 20s to his 50s, really struggling and not, and just looking back, it's 2020 now, and partly I dedicated my career really because of my brother and understand and things that I was exposed to and saw. So when I started learning more about autism and students, and solutions, it clicked, and then also I saw it within myself, so it clicked. But the point I was trying to make is just, looking back at it with my parents, just didn't understand it, just didn't see it, just didn't know, what to do. But I think it's different, in this day and time. But culturally, the aspect of receiving support services, the aspect of, if it's mental health, receiving mental health support, there's still, outdated culture, outdated beliefs, that need to, can be addressed. Um, some things that I see in the school systems, I just really don't understand, from receiving services and support. I don't know. I don't understand it, is the best thing I can say. I don't understand it, and I respect it. I don't understand it. And it definitely does not, it doesn't help, meet the needs of students. And
Well, I
so
think one of the key things, because one of my main work is working with the school system, is again the perception is that the majority of young people who are autistic are boys, but I think that that's actually inaccurate. There's so many girls who are going undiagnosed because for girls or non-binary or non-cis boys, um, or non-cis girls, so many people who do the diagnosing just do not have cultural competency, right? So like, why was your son looking at women, right? Like a lot of Black families are very matriarchal. We have a very like matriarchal structure, like, and a lot of Black children also look people in the eye, right? And talk to people, right? And they also are not gender aware. So they do not know how to diagnose girls and they do not know how to diagnose people who are not white. They only know how to diagnose white boys. So they are missing girls, they are missing women, they are missing children who are not white, children who do not speak English. They are missing queer children. So it is a huge thing that I see over and over and over again. And so you have all of these now late diagnosed women, such as myself, or later stage girls, and then you get this thing, well, like you were in the gifted class, you started reading at 2, you had this, but then it's like you had OCD, you were filled with anxiety, you had an eating disorder, you had all of these things which were caused because of intense masking
yes.
that contributed to it. Because if I had the tools that I have now in my 40s, I wouldn't have suffered through all of that. So yes, maybe I had, straight A's and did this and did that and whatever, but it was because I was like masking all the time because I was suffering, because I wasn't in a supportive environment. And you hear that a lot from, Black kids who are masking, and from girls or non-boys, gender non-conforming, autistic children. So I think that a lot of it is just, a lot of the people who are doing the diagnosis, um, do not know how to they don't have cultural or gender, competency whatsoever. In addition to the fact that there are families who are listening to the doctors who are saying, "Oh, your kid is fine."
Yeah. And I definitely agree with that. Agree with you. Autism, social emotional developmental delays, it's challenging or really impossible for an individual that is not of the culture, that doesn't understand the culture, and that does not understand the social and emotional like milestones and characteristics to be able to evaluate. It's like going into another community. Myself going into another community is challenging, and you're absolutely right, about those barriers, yeah.
Ayana, do you have anything to add before I go into the next question?
Well, my diagnosis story is, I'm gonna keep it brief. I was late diagnosed, and I was misdiagnosed first. I was diagnosed as bipolar. I was put on medication for bipolar, which destroyed my body. Like my thyroid exploded. It stopped my cycle. I gained like 100 pounds. When I went to the doctors, my dad's like, I gotta force this girl to eat. So that's not why is she gaining so much weight. So, and at the time, like my doctors just thought I was crazy. They didn't know what was wrong with me. And because traditionally the face of autism isn't a Black woman. So
Mhm.
I was put in a psychiatric hospital because they thought I was crazy. So when I was there, one of the doctors there suspected that I was autistic. It was a Dominican doctor, and she suspected that I was autistic. So they did the assessment. I didn't know that's what they were doing at the time. I was actually really frustrated. It was 3 days and a couple hours each day. They spoke to my dad. They did the assessment, and I think like 2 days after they came back, my treatment team, and they were like, "Yeah, she's on the spectrum." And even when I got diagnosed, I was like, "I'm not autistic. That's for white people." So even like when I got diagnosed, I still wasn't accepting my diagnosis. And I was struggling because I wasn't accepting it. And it wasn't until I accepted it that I was able to really live my life and, walk in my truth. But being late diagnosed and misdiagnosed, it happens so much with Black women. And the fact that so many Black women are being diagnosed right now, I just love
Mhm.
that for us. And people are like, why are you happy people are being diagnosed? Because people deserve to know why they're different.
That's
And
right.
they deserve to be able to get the accommodations that they
Mhm.
need.
My life is a million times better since being diagnosed, and it's like I don't feel like my brain is broken anymore.
Yeah, like you're not a failed neurotypical. You're just
Exactly.
rich
Exactly. That's exactly right.
autistic.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh, Yana, I'm sorry that you had to go through so much trauma to get your diagnosis.
Yeah, and
I definitely feel that. I
I
definitely
think it
feel
was
that.
missed as a child because I'm an artist. So everybody was just like, "Oh, she's eccentric,
Yeah. Yeah.
she is, leave her alone."
Yeah,
So
I like the same. It's like, oh, she's
yeah,
gets straight A's, honors, honors class, gifted, talented, blah, 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 blah. I'm like,
yeah,
yeah, but I'm like this all the time, not eating, picking my skin, you
yeah.
know,
I had no skin left on my fingers. They
none,
were
none on
like,
my lip, none on my fingers,
they're like,
throwing
she's
up.
eating the clay.
Yeah,
She's
not,
art
throwing
show.
up, whatever. Even now, still my mom's like, well, you were just a very sensitive child, but you started reading it too. I'm like, hyperlexia much?
Yeah.
Yeah. We kind of already answered about the stigma, so I'm going to skip right to the next one. But and I'm going to start with Camille with this. But what advice would you give to parents seeking out resources for a child or a loved one?
Um, I would recommend that they get a self advocate. Honestly,
And
um,
your organization.
I mean, in my organization, and I can introduce them to plenty of self advocates, but I say this because, again, parents have to be in a good headspace. And oftentimes, when they get these diagnoses, they're not in a good headspace. So I
Yeah.
can tell you to go to the moon. It's not going to help you if you haven't come to terms with who your child is.
Mm.
I say this, You know, you have to mourn that child that you thought you were going to have, and you have to embrace the child that you were given. I'm not like a religious person, but I believe that things happen for a reason. And you should be able to say, this is my baby, this is my child. And that's step one. And then step two is you really do need to reach out to organizations such as mine, because we do offer parent training. And our parent training it helps our parents become responsive to the needs of their child. We don't teach them how to reframe their child. We teach them how to redirect their child. You know, why are they taking their clothes off? Because they don't like wearing denim, or whatever the case may be. But we have our parents, we're teaching them how to be data collectors, because you have to be responsive to your children's needs while they're young, because a lot of the behaviors, and I'm air quotes, they don't start overnight. And if we're able to be receptive and responsive to our children's needs, it makes their transition into adulthood and into this world a lot better. So I recommend that, yeah, you find an organization similar to ours. If ours isn't your thing, because I'm very brutally honest with parents. I'm like, this is what you need to do. And I don't have time to be, you know, woo, woo, woo. I don't, because you know what? Life doesn't woo, woo, woo you. Mm-hmm. And we have to be strong, and we have to be effective. And I always have this thing. If you're crying in the car, who's shooting the video of you crying in the car? Because I don't want to see any more of those videos either. That's just a side note of the parents.
And your kid is going to see those eventually.
If
you post those on no, but I have to say,
car,
like,
who's
I have to
you?
say, like, when you post those things on like Instagram, like social media is forever. And I have to say to the parents who do that, like, please stop.
Because your child should never think that they were a burden to you.
Yeah.
My son knows he gets on my nerves, but that's just something totally unautistic related. I mean, he's raggedy, but it has nothing to do with his diagnosis.
I'll say I'm on the struggle bus, but you know what? I put him on the struggle bus too. Like he'll say to me, like you know, like he'll say to me, Mom, I don't want to listen to your old 1900s R&B music. Turn that off. Like he'll say that to me. He'll be like, you're from in the 1900s. Did they have TV? Like he'll like he'll joke. He'll like joke with me.
You know what? I feel some kind of way about your son, and I don't even
know, right? I know. I feel some kind of way.
He's basically calling people old. Well,
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. He calls me.
I'm gonna let him be great over there with you.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, but like, you know, like he gets annoyed with both my kids, you know, they like, you know, they get on my nerves, you know, we get on each other's nerves, right? Like that's human nature.
It's equal.
But
the beauty of it is being able to say we get on each other's nerves, because we also have to treat our children like every other child, you know, and so we can't go overboard. And that's another thing that we do. We have Natasha Nelson, our self-advocate and mom, who teaches our parents positive discipline. Because our kids do need discipline. You can't just let them run in the street and play in traffic. You have to do something. So we have a lot of tools at the Color of Autism that we offer for families, and our services to our families are free. Now, if you're a business on the low and you try to sneak into one of my parenting classes, I will find you. I'm good at that, and I will put you out. Because our parenting spaces are a place where people can be free. They can turn their cameras on. I want my parents to have autonomy. I want them to be able to turn their cameras off and look somebody else Black in the face and say, oh, it's okay because you're there. You know what I mean? And to be able to ask our experts the right questions, because we tend to shut down when we see people that don't understand what we go through. Yeah. They don't know who Big Mama is.
Right. 100%.
Yeah. That's 100%. A big deal. That's a big deal. Yeah.
Don't be wearing your street clothes on the bed.
Right.
Right? That part. Yeah.
Take your shoes off at the door.
Take your
But you should do anyway, because it's just that, you know, but
it's nasty.
It is. But
Ayana, you have anything to add to that? Like what advice would you give parents?
Wrapped it up really
You really did. She wrapped it up.
I agree with everything she said.
100%.
For me, my dad had to do a lot of the footwork and finding out what worked for me. When I was diagnosed, it was kind of just like, okay, she's autistic, go home. Like, and speaking to like some of the white people that I've met who are autistic, I feel like they got the red carpet rolled out for them. And us, they just kind of like threw us out in the street, like with
Yeah.
no resources. So, my dad got online and he found like the therapies that worked for me, which is CBT and DBT. I had to do
Mhm.
speech therapy as an adult because I had like a bad round of seizures and during the pandemic, and I was just all messed up from that. But find parenting groups, organizations, advocates, follow advocates. So yeah, she pretty much, that's what I would recommend them to do.
Yeah, I agree. Find culturally competent ones and don't be afraid. Parents, don't be afraid to make a lot of noise because you better believe these white parents will come in there and they will Karen it up.
Yes, they
So
will.
you do not be afraid to make noise. You make sure the teachers know you, the principal knows you, the speech therapist. If you don't like that speech therapist, go to the supervisor. If you don't like the OT, go to the OT supervisor, ask for change. You absolutely can watch what they're doing with your child. If they say, no, you're not allowed to observe, yes, you're allowed to observe. Yes, you're allowed to ask questions. You don't like what the behavioral therapist is doing. If they say, oh, I want to give 20 hours of ABA therapy. Excuse me? That doesn't sound like a right mandate to me. You go in and you ask, what does that mean? What does that look like? Are they going to be sitting there doing discrete trials at a table, manding for 20 hours? Say this, here's a cookie. Say this, here's a cookie. Like, you have the right to ask those specific questions and to have evidence, to see the data. If you don't like what it is, you go to their supervisor, you ask for a change, to ask to see their qualifications. If they try to give you the runaround, you say, no, 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 no. That's not how it works. And every meeting that you have for the IFSP, if your kid is birth through 2.11 years old, for your turning 5, for your school age meeting, you bring in an advocate. And I don't care if your advocate is Aunt Yolanda. They don't need to know that. You bring in somebody and you tell them that that's your advocate. So that you have somebody there who's also your eyes and ears, who's taking notes for you as well. Because those meetings can be very overwhelming when they're sitting there and they're saying, well, we think it's just a 504 plan that your kid needs, not an IEP. No, no, no. Make sure you get an IEP. Make sure everything's in writing and don't sign it there at the meeting. Take it home, look it over, have somebody else look it over.
And if I could just say this too, part of our process of teaching parents to be data collectors is also when they are going into clinics, you should be going into the clinic and you need to be setting your own goals. Like, you need to say, this is what's important in our household. Mm-hmm. If your household is a Muslim household, you need to be able to say, we can only use our left hand for certain things. Right. You need to be able to say that, and they need to be able to teach the child what your practices are. If you pray, even if you say, I want my child to learn how to say a prayer before dinner, hey, write that little prayer down and hand it to that person and say, this is what we want to work on, or we just want to work on he or she putting their hands together, whatever the case may be. And I just gave that as an example because we need to be able to tell these therapeutic teams what we want, and we need to be able to tell these teachers what we want. But too often we walk into all of these meetings and we don't have any data. We don't have data. We're letting them tell us, and then we want to verbalize stuff. No, say nothing. Write it all down. Right. Say nothing. Write it all down. Don't have any conversations with anybody. Email everything, because you need receipts for everything you're going. Receipts. And in regards to like IEPs, you want an IEP, you don't want a 504. A 504 is a suggestion. IEP is a law. Exactly. You need to understand these things, and you can't go for the okie doke. You got to be strong, and that's one of the reasons why I said, I know that parents are overwhelmed. I know this, and I know you got a group of people telling you need self-care. You do. But you know what self-care really is when you understand how to be responsive to your child's needs, and you can take all the breaks in the world. Because I'm telling you, if you go to a spa day and you come home and there's poop smeared on that wall, it erases that whole spa day. Mm-hmm. You need to figure out how to get that poop from meeting the wall and meeting the toilet. That's what you need. You know, and I'm not against anything of self-care, because I do think that parents really, really need to I overstand and need to take care of yourself. But I tell you that the headspace of negativity is so strong that it's hard for a lot of them to come out of it. And that's one reason why we're there, because we want to be there for our parents. We want them to be strong advocates for their child, and most importantly for themselves, because if they're drowning, they can't throw the life preserver to their own child.
That's right. Thank you, Camille. I'm gonna go on to the next question, which I'm actually gonna take first and then send it out. How can service providers play a role in creating more equitable resources and systems? I actually love this question because I actually teach this in my courses as a special education professor. And these are the workshops that I create through my organization and also at NYU and CUNY. I work with training OTs, speech pathologists, special educators, paras, and aides. I teach them about universal design for learning. So, and I write about this too as a researcher. This is what I do. So one of the first things, again, going back to you write it down. What Camille said was perfect. You let them know the strengths of your child. Go in with a strengths-based, almost like a strengths-based IEP. What are the things that your child likes to do? What are their likes? What are the things that they like to do for fun, that they like to eat? And they like to play with, they like to watch on TV. What are the things that you like to do as a family? Go in with all of that written down, send it as an email and say, these are the things that we like to do. This is what a typical day looks like for us. Here's how you, for example, as an OT can help with, is it feeding with a spoon? Is it, setting the table? Is it making their bed? Depending upon what stage of life they're at, what their skills are. How can you help with this? Where is their role? And also, how can you teach me those things that you're working on in the therapeutic space, in the classroom, in the daycare, to build those up at home? Same thing with speech. What are you working on? It can't just be sitting there looking at a mirror doing flashcards. No one is doing that in the real world. No one is sitting there looking at flashcards going, oh. They need to be able to take what they're doing in speech and apply it in the real world, right? So how can they create an equitable system that they're working on with their speech pathologists that you can use in your home and also out in the neighborhood? So like Camille said, do you want them to work on like learning a prayer? Do you want them to work on greeting their family? Do you want them to work on like working in the neighborhood? Do you want them to work on turn taking, playing with the family? Do you have family game night sometime? Do you guys play spades? Do you play dominoes? Do you sing certain songs? What is it that you want them to do? And talk about it. The cultural competency is really important. And so that is one of the ways that you can have your service providers create more equitable resources. Because chances are you're going to have a white speech pathologist and they're not going to know anything at all about the type of songs that you guys listen to at home, your dialect that you speak, which is a legitimate dialect, and they could be correcting your kid in the way they speak, which is not a legitimate way to correct them. There's so many times when I go in and I'm like, the way they're speaking is a dialect, and you don't need to correct the way they speak. That's not what you should be focusing on. They need to be focusing on and feeling confident. So that's something that I just want parents to be really empowered in. But what Camille said is 100% true. Put it all in writing. Camille, anything you would like to add to that question about what can service providers do to play a role in creating more equitable resources and systems?
No, I think that you nailed it all, but I would like to say on the flip side, with parents, that if you take in a non-speaking child on Monday to the speech pathologist on Friday, they will not be spitting 16 bars.
Yeah. Manage expectations.
You need to know that, okay? Because
Yeah.
it does not happen overnight. It may not happen in 3 weeks. It may not happen in 3 months. It may not happen in a year. But I always say trust the process, but you have to be aware. You can't make expectations that aren't really real. Because I remember when my son was younger, I used to have set these little imaginary goals in my head. Oh, at 10, he's going to be doing this. And he wasn't doing it. At this age, he's going to be doing this. And he wasn't going to be doing this. And then I said, who is this goal for? Is it for me or for him? because I really didn't take him into account the way that I should have. And again, if it was a self advocate that kind of tapped me on the shoulder and was like, "You doing this wrong," and I didn't get offended because I knew that I wasn't doing it right, but I knew I could do better. So, that's my only thing. Just have realistic goals for your therapeutic teams and just make sure that they are adhered to. And I also have to say, though, on the flip side, depending on where you live, if you go in with a lot of good stuff for your IEP meeting, they hold that against you and they want to take the IEP completely away.
And they're not allowed to do that. They cannot do that. That's illegal under IDEA. They cannot say that just because your kid is on grade level or above grade level, they don't need an IEP. So just
no, that's true. But the problem is that one of the things that you said, sometimes parents aren't taking someone else with them to say, like, this is my advocate, right? So if you're there in a hot room for 3 hours by yourself, sequestered with all of these so-called experts, and all the experts are telling you your child doesn't need an IEP, you're going to side with them because you don't have the information you need in order to properly advocate. So what you said about having an advocate, I'm not going to tell you go spend money that you don't have on a person that may or may not do a good job. But Francine, somebody named Francine, Gwen, Keisha, take them with you and tell them don't talk, just have a grimace on their face.
That's right. I told you, that's what I said. Taking Aunt Yolanda. Everybody got an Aunt Yolanda.
They do, or Gwen.
Take her in. You better take her in.
Gwen used to smoke Newports and she don't play.
So. That's right. Menthol.
Tamika's laughing at me.
Yeah, my had menthol. I remember that little, the little clutch purse. The clutch purse with the thing, a little open up.
Mine had kitten heels, so.
They always had kitten heels.
And Newport, so.
That's right.
Take them with you. That's all.
That's right. And just make her sit there. Just like you said with Grimace. I think, the last thing is really to have the panelists, we're going to all share resources, Tamika, and then open it up for Q&A, right?
Exactly. Any resources that the panelists have, that you like to share, that you think people need to know?
Well, I think it just goes back to earlier to what Camille said. Find an organization, find a foundation, find a self-advocate. Those are the type of resources that I would recommend to parents. And Camille, I love the respect that you give self-advocates because I've met some moms of autistic children who hate our guts. So
but we know which ones those are, though.
Yeah, we do. The Karens.
They're not part of the community.
The Karens of the autism.
Yeah, they're not part of the community. We know. The unseasoned.
Yeah.
And where can people find you, Ayana? I know you share a lot of great posts, so where people can find you.
Oh, Phenomenally Autistic on all platforms.
All right. Kenneth, what resources do you have?
Yeah, I would share it was a private middle school, high school, STEM school for students who are autistic, Science Prep Academy that I founded. That's a model that's based upon a lot of things that we talked about, strength-based, perspective, helping students to really reach their full potential. And it's really a model to change to shift the paradigm, so individuals that are looking for schools, or individuals that are starting schools, that vision was to really shift. And so it transitioned actually into an education research center called Neurodiversity Education Research Center. And I have also transitioned to independently, start to go out and talk. And I wrote a book, which is actually a mother's guide on autism, based upon my perspective as an educator. So a lot of things that we discuss, and that can be found on my website, which is just kennethmims.com.
Thank you. And Camille, though you heard mention Color of Autism, which I second is a really great organization. So where can they find you and any additional information, resources you have?
So you can find me at thecolorofautism.org. Color of Autism on all social media platforms. If you're going to be in the Houston area, if you live in the Houston area this weekend, I'll be at Wayside Baptist Church doing a community talk. And then next week, I will be in Baltimore. But if you go to my social media, I'll have that information posted for you. But there's also, and I put it in the chat, and I don't know if my chat goes out to everyone, there's Supernova Mama Natasha Nelson on Instagram, and I recommend you connect with her because she has some great resources in regards to being Black, autistic, and parents.
Yes, and she supports everybody.
Yeah, I've worked
And
with her
she supports
before.
everybody.
Yeah,
She does.
because
And one thing I want to say about me having respect for self-advocates, if I could, is that my son is you. So if I don't respect you, I don't respect him. You understand? And so that's what's important. And parents need to understand that the self-advocate of yesteryear, back in the 1900s, Heather,
Mm.
the white ones, they don't, I mean, they still exist, but self-advocates aren't these mean people that are out to get you. And I think those white self-advocates of the 1900s set the precedents that people are just literally afraid of self-advocates. And so those people became parents. And then their own kids started scaring them.
Mm.
And then I think everything kind of is not as bad as it was. So like I said, the best thing you can do is align, be an ally to a self-advocate and allow them to teach you and do information sharing between each other. Because just like I say, there's so much self-advocates have given me, I've given self-advocates, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In regards to sometimes when you got a situation and you trying to cope, I've been a sounding board and I know that I've made a difference. So it's a two-way street. But thank you guys for having voices and being so strong in your identities. I appreciate that because again, you are my son's community.
Yeah, be the glimpse into the future, what the possibilities could be. Yes, yes. And Heather, as well, where can people find you?
I sent you my or sent it to Charlotte, I guess. My Instagram is Learning Advocate. So I'm the Learning Advocate, but you'll find a Learning Advocate and has a graphic of a black girl with a tree as a brain and a puff, Afro puff. And you can also find my writing in a bunch of publications if you just look up Heather Clark, and Parents and JED Foundation and CARE and Washington Post. You can just find my articles. I link them on my Instagram, but you can also just Google my name and you can find a lot of my writing. And also at NYU, if you look me up as well, you can find my research.
Thank you, thank you. And also, Charlotte have put some of the websites and links up in the chat. So the panelists, the attendees should be able to see it. And then also, everyone who received the recording and not been here may not be able to be here, but watch the recording. You will receive should receive the resources of the website links, and I'll make sure it's on YouTube as well. I believe we have a few questions. We have some time for questions. So from Amanda Davis, she asks, where does a parent go when they know nothing and just trying to get a diagnosis? Anyone can. We talked about that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, but it's systems that are set up. It depends on where they are, right?
Yeah.
It depends on the insurance. It depends on the county, how they have to. It's not easy. I'm gonna go back on mute because maybe somebody else can answer this question because it's really difficult.
I would. Yeah, I would like to know where they are, and I don't want to like put them on blast or anything, as the young folks say, but I always suggest, and I'm probably because I'm at a big university system, but a lot of university systems have a sliding scale like child development clinic. And if they have a child, like if you go to like your local college, like let's say you're in University of Texas. Like I know University of Texas has a whole developmental psychology program, and their grad students can help get a diagnosis, and it's a sliding scale. And so their professors, their leading professors will help when they're helping their students doing their theses and doctorate programs, they can help with getting that, like for their psychology students and their medical students. NYU has the same type of program. So does Montefiore here in New York City. I mean, a lot of we have so many universities here, but I know like a lot of, I would imagine University of Michigan has the same program. All the universities around Detroit, around Michigan would have those same type of programs. So depending upon what this state you're in, what city you're in, I would start with your university and your hospital system, especially if money is a factor, because a lot of these programs have a sliding scale, and they work with the graduate department and they do it like that. And that's a really good way to start. Like I was even able to get my son his a speech eval for like $50 in New York, which is probably one of the most expensive places to get any kind of evaluation.
Yeah, I would like to just, clarify because it becomes confusing. Because when you talk about the diagnosis, there's two, there's the educational and then there's the medical.
Well, you
And
can't get a diagnosis at a school, right? The only thing that you can get at the school when you're going through an IEP is a classification. There's 12 classifications, right? So when you're birthed through under 4.11, you are a preschooler. Well, no, when you're 3 through almost 5, you're a preschooler with a disability. When you're birth through 2, you are a baby toddler with a disability. When you're in school, you have a disability classification under IDEA. But when you're going through the educational process through a school psychologist, you are not given a diagnosis. School psychologists are not allowed to give diagnoses. They give a classification. So it's a completely different process than going through the process through a university hospital system. Two completely separate processes, completely
yeah,
separate. So it's
but
just
what I
very
was,
important that, so that's why I'm saying to the parents to go through, check their local like their hospital system, check their university system. That's where you want to go if you want to get a neuropsychological evaluation. And that's
yeah,
what you would want to get the proper autistic diagnosis.
yeah, I was just going to provide some clarity on that. So what I was, what I was going to say is that there's two different, and it's not a diagnosis from education. And so a parent can have a diagnosis from a medical, either a pediatrician or a psychologist is where you will go, and then you will receive the diagnosis and the treatment and services required. But within the education, even if you have a medical diagnosis, if you bring that within the educational world, unfortunately, the educational system is not really friendly always towards that diagnosis, and it doesn't integrate. So sometimes parents get confused, so when they get I guess evaluation for autism as a learning disability, it doesn't, it's only, within the school systems, and then you will receive support services within the school systems, as far as speech and OT, and for the most
But
part.
autism is not a learning disability. That's not a call. It's not a classification. It's not one of the 12 classifications under IDEA for a learning disability.
Yeah, unless they have unless it's like my son, he has IDD
Right.
as well. So he
Right.
has a dual diagnosis. And I
You
think
can have
that's
it,
where
yeah.
it gets murky, because a lot of people don't understand autism itself is not seen as a learning disability.
It's not a learning disability.
Well, I'm just articulating. But what I'm saying, let me articulate. Articulating this.
Not you. I'm not saying that to you, Camille. I'm saying
but
it to Kenneth.
I'm saying that
I'm saying
because
to Kenneth,
this
because he
is
said
what parents.
80,
I'm just saying.
yeah.
No, but I'm saying this is what parents hear and think. That's
Right.
why I said it like that. And so it's important for parents to understand that most often, but not always, people have dual diagnosis. Now, they don't always have IDD. They don't always have anxiety, but you have to be aware of co-occurring conditions. And so oftentimes I'm sorry for cutting Kenneth off again, but oftentimes I hear this from parents. Oh, he's so smart. His IQ was 145. I'm like, okay, but how are you dealing with your social emotional?
Mhm.
You know, so people tend to think that smart, they got a prize unicorn, and they don't understand the unicorn is in the corner picking their skin off. And I ain't making fun of that. I'm just saying. So we need to be aware of who our children are. We can't be cherry picking because you reading Einstein's theory or whatever,
Mhm.
and because they're so smart. I hate when parents lean on, he's so smart, he's so bright, and I'm like, and I bet you've never asked him how he feels today
Exactly.
or any other day. And what is it like to be looking at the ceiling and I go to sleep? Because I get these emails from these people who don't sleep and have all these other brilliant problems. So I just
Right.
want to be clear on that. But I get where he's going, because what he's saying is really, really true. It's very confusing when the parents take these diagnoses into the school system. They don't recognize them as for what they are. And oftentimes parents get confused because they'll get a assessment in the school when the child is in like kindergarten, and they'll think it's a diagnosis, and then they can't get the support services they need. So you need to be mindful that you need medical diagnoses first, and that trumps that stuff at the school that they have. But that's what I think, you know.
That's the
I
point
agree
I'm
with
trying to.
Camille. I agree with Camille. You need to get the medical diagnosis first because the school will listen to that more than their. And I hate to say this, but it's not really in the school's best interest to give you any kind of classification because it means that they have to give you services. And they don't want to do that. Not all schools, not all schools, not all school systems, but I think even now more under this administration, it's going to be even worse. I
But
don't
I
know how
do
you guys
think
feel.
if we could for a moment, if Kenneth could really talk about, because what he did though is, from what I know, because I've been, you know, off and on in contact with him for a number of years, when you see a situation where you do have children that would be classified as gifted, but you still have to accommodate some of their other needs. And I think he found a really sweet spot in his academy at doing that, meaning giving them the chance to be the STEM, you know, shining stars that they are, but also providing them the other things that they needed. And I think that we need to have more of those types of situations where but we also need to have a place for children who have greater supports needs to go to as well, because, you know, people tend to forget about them
Yeah,
altogether
100%.
sometimes, you
Yeah.
know?
And the
And this,
artistic kids too, like the kids who maybe have the artistic and language giftedness and not the
And that's
STEM.
what happened to me because I could draw and dance and do all that other stuff. I could excel in any artistic like environment, but I was ripping my hair out, ripping my nails off. I was having like meltdowns, but we didn't know they were meltdowns. And I'm sharing this with permission. I'd go like every night, I'd be like, I can't breathe. And my dad'd be like, there's nothing wrong with you. Go to bed. Go to bed. So because they didn't know anything about autism, but because I could draw and do and excel in any art environment, it was just like there's nothing wrong with her, she's fine. So
Yes, yes. I know there was, well, there was one question. Oh, okay, Chameleon answered it, but I can post that to all of you, the panelists as well. Any suggested resources for advocacy, help, and more support as late diagnosed older women over 55, Black women with multiple disabilities, including autism, being autistic.
Is it there? Can I read it? It's easier for me to read
Oh,
it. Is it there?
it was, I don't know if there's a way.
I think you can still type an answer, because I just asked where do they reside, and I think you can still go to it, and maybe you can, or
Oh, I can see it. Oh, okay.
yeah,
Yes, thank you,
yeah.
Camille. Thank you. Um, okay, yeah, that's a good question. Where do they reside? Autism in Black is also I know her really well, Maria. She is also a late diagnosed Black autistic woman. And she's really amazing. I think that you really have to find your, can I say tribe? I don't know if that's not allowed to say anymore. Well, we're Black, we can say tribe. uh, I just, for me, having like the biggest joy for me is meeting other Black autistic women and marginalized genders. That's where and Black neurodiverse women. That's my biggest joy, is just
Yeah.
like connecting and nerding out over the most ridiculous things, like whether it's like, girl, you got your hair done, or let's get our nails done, or who's doing your braids, or um, how many gold hoops do I have? Like, see, I didn't line up cars, but I love to look at all my gold hoops lined up, you know? Like, what is the latest we're going to go out and see the latest Marvel movie, or like a bunch of us are reading Matriarch, and then we're going to talk about it. I saw Sinners twice. I'm going to see it a third time. I'm like all dissecting it, like how we're all dissecting it, nerding out over every little detail, like every little detail. Like you can't do that with other people. And when we go on and on and on and on and on together, we don't, oh, she will, that's awesome. We don't get annoyed because no one's saying to us, you're too much, you're too extra. I don't want to talk about this anymore.
Yeah, I can't watch TV with people like with neurotypical people too much because I have to watch it like a few times because the first time is like for the audio, the second time is for
Right.
the visual, and then I have to like put it all together. So they're like, you watched this already. Why are you watching it again? I'm like,
I
because
know. We actually went to watch Sinners the first time with captioning, and it was just like, because I need captioning,
yeah, me too.
and nobody, no, like it was just nobody said, oh, why do you need captioning? We all got it. It was like, you know, and then going again, and then going again, and my friends know, like, we got to go to see the movie again and again, and it's just like, and then we're all talking about we're going to buy the movie, and then we're going to watch it again, and we want to see the deleted scenes, and it's just so fun that we can all just do this together. Ayana, you and I, we gotta connect
Yeah,
now. We gotta
I've
get in the
never met
circle.
I've never met a Black autistic woman in person.
Oh, no, 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 you have to.
Right.
And it's just like you have to find your people and have that, And also even like ADHDers, it's a different vibe, but like getting that like neurodiverse group together, and just having that where you're all like vibing is just you're just gonna cultivate joy,
Yeah,
you
nobody will
know?
call you a weirdo.
Yeah. It's just that. And then even when you just need to like just um what do you call it when you just
You can
dissociate and
you
you're
can
just together,
unmask.
you're parallel playing together. It's
You
the
don't have to
best.
mask and you can just be yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like I'm sitting doing my thing, you're sitting doing your thing, but we're doing it together, but separately. And nobody's saying, what's wrong with you two? And you're
Yeah.
just like, yeah, it's like we're parallel playing. What? Like, let us parallel play.
Yes, yes. Yeah, building community.
Yeah.
Yes, and thank you. And the last question I see is by Chloe. What services do you all have this time? Maybe we already answered this, but what services do you all have for 2E kids, more so profoundly gifted, not interested in public school and IEP?
So they're not interested in public school or IEPs.
Yeah, seem like.
Yeah, I can.
So so they're looking for like speech, OT. I mean, this is so vague. I don't, are
I
they
can
looking?
speak. I can speak towards
Okay,
that a little bit
okay.
as far as my story.
Yes.
Um, and so, as a teacher, I was a physical science middle school teacher, and I had a student who was autistic, and I, had asked a high level question, but I didn't know, autism, or anything about it. So he really blew my mind, and I had to figure out exactly, what his so-called disability was, or um, what his IEP said. He was brand new, had an extra teacher, sat by himself in the middle school classroom. And but I later found out, he was diagnosed as autism. I have, being autistic, and so I started doing research, on that while I was working on my master's degree. So my bachelor's degree was actually in physics, and so my master's degree was in broad field science, certified to teach every science, every grade level. And so with the 2E, the twice exceptional, meaning autism and gifted, as they call it within school systems. At that time, I just saw a connection and love for science. So that's what, made me become passionate about creating a pathway for individuals to transition to the STEM workforce, because I saw it in myself, but I saw it in my peers, as far as my physics professors and graduate students. And at that time, it didn't make, it was just something that I saw. But later now, companies are hiring, and many individuals in the tech world, blah blah blah. But for students, this is the challenging part, because students, may be gifted, but that autism still plays a interesting role, within really from a mental health, social, emotional, and a mental health standpoint as individuals get older. The students have the ability to transition to the workforce, transition to college, high rate of dropouts, high rate of, suicide attempts, high rate of mental health, when you're in, when you're in college, and those type of things. And so that's something that I was exposed to. But as far as IEPs, this is where I was trying to get to the point I was trying to make, earlier, as far as there's a difference. So you have an IEP and support services that you receive in school, but that does not encompass everything that an individual needs. So many times parents may have an IEP, and that's really kind of like a basic type of support that you may get in school, as far as a speech, OT, and then so within the learning environment, IEP, it's focusing on the learning environment. It's not therapy. Educational school systems do not provide therapy. They provide, support, to help individuals to master the content. Like, school systems focus on standards, educational standards, from like science, math. They're not specialists when it comes to meeting the developmental needs of individual students, who are autistic. And so that's why, parents, have to get that medical diagnosis, and to really, take it as far as they can, with receiving support. Because a kid may be twice exceptional, but like Camille was saying, they may be, have other, they may be bright, but they're going to have some other, things that may, create barriers to transition. So that may be, around speech, behavior, mental health, so I just advise, I advise to get support, from both education and medical, but also to make sure that you're getting that medical support from the medical world, and to help the transition. But but in addition to that, it's a different day and time. There's thousands of jobs out there, companies that are hiring, from Google, Microsoft, around the planet, and then there's hundreds and hundreds of colleges. So you have a student who's has the potential to transition to college. There's hundreds of colleges out there nowadays that have special programs for students who are neurodivergent, autistic, and they have different support. So so it's a good opportunity. But I would just say follow along, with all the recommendations that were discussed, as far as finding your support, your tribe, advocates, and also making sure that you get that therapeutic support. But also, I just find a mental health need, that pops up, as individuals transition into adulthood, and particularly like in college, because when individuals transition from a child parent relationship, or a student teacher relationship, and then they transition to adult, and start to take on more adult responsibilities within the world, it's challenging for everybody. But when they're away from their network, their support systems, if they go away to college, those type of things, dog die, break up with a boyfriend, girlfriend, those type of things, individuals, the divorce or something like that, just to have a support system, built in to meet those needs. And sometimes it's really overlooked, because on the outside you look, oh, individual, people say dumb stuff like, oh, they don't look autistic, or they, or whatever that means. but the individuals still, that, maybe twice 2E or twice exceptional, really have, needs, and it doesn't come out until like so-called, critical moments. So that's my, 2 cents for that.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to clarify because I was reading Chloe's and I said your name out loud. Probably gonna be mad at me, but she wanted to know like any recommendations, specifically for like schools or type of classes that you would recommend that her children would feel comfortable in. And I'm not gonna say where you are, Kenneth, but she's in your area, and I'm not gonna say that out loud because that's why I asked it privately. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yeah. So
yeah, I'll
people,
say it. But yeah,
yeah,
so the school that I started is in Phoenix, and
right.
um, and so it's a STEM based, so robotics, coding, programming. So with my background in STEM, I use that as a hook, because for whatever reason, many students, and not all, were engaged with STEM, and that's totally stereotypical. But it was robotics. So I would suggest, and I have found, robotics, coding, but art as well, art. And so it has to be individualized. So you just have to, experiment and really understand your child, what they enjoy. And
Yeah, it
then
depends upon what they're gifted in, right? Because maybe they're
exactly.
supremely gifted in writing or reading or linguistics and not STEM.
Exactly. And so finding that out, discovering that, and then leveraging that and supporting that, academically. So those type of programs, and then alternative programs as well, and alternative forms. So it's no particular right answer, but just taking that approach. But I've been more than happy to support if you reach out to me.
So something that Kenneth said was about those kind of services for outside of school. I wrote an article for Care magazine that they asked me to write about different benefits that parents can access for their children outside of school. And I think it's important to know that certain disabilities, certain diagnoses are available that you automatically get certain benefits. Of course, hopefully those are not going to be, or they're not on the chopping block of what's happening in DC right now. But autistic children are one of those categories, not related to IEPs, but related to just if your child has a disability, it's not based on your income, you are able to apply for an income waiver and get access to all sorts of services. So I sent it to the hosts of this webinar so you can share that to parents. So
If I
parents
can
can
say
find
this,
it.
I have to interrupt you on that one. It exists, and your child might get into services in the year 2035. The wait lists are so long.
Yeah, they are very, very long.
The
They're
wait
very,
lists
very
are
long.
so long. So for me personally, I'm not comfortable giving you the expectation that here's a list.
Yeah, but
you can
but
get on that list.
yes.
And I recommend that you call once a week and find out if anybody got canceled or if someone didn't make the appointment or whatever.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
But I'm going to tell you right now, the wait lists are extremely long. And that's one of the reasons why we do what we do with the parent training. And that's one of the reasons why I have to keep drilling this home, is that we as a community have to get on board and be supportive of our community. And we need to put pen to paper and write our representatives and write our local people and say,
100%,
these are the services
100%.
that we need for our families. This is what we need. I voted for you. You go get this service.
Exactly.
That's what we need to do, because we can't sit around and be social media gangsters. We need to be the type of gangsters that put pen to paper and mail letters. I say mail a physical letter and send an email. Mail a physical letter. Spend that dollar, mail that letter. I don't know how much letters cost, but anymore, so they change
Universal. I know it's a universal stamp. I think it's
put
75
a
cents. I'm not
stamp on
sure.
it and mail it. Send an email. Your voices need to be heard. Your voices need to be heard. Period. Point blank. Because I don't want to send you to the land of wait lists, because that's where there's waivers in the land of wait lists. And
yes, but I know like New York State, which has a large, and New York City, which has the largest number of public school children in the country. We have 1 million children. We have the longest wait lists in the country. We do have children who are getting off those wait lists every month.
I was gonna say you all have little you all have a different system. You have a different system. I would say you, California, New Jersey, your systems are a little bit different. People can access something. They can access something. You know what I mean? Like something. But we have people that can access nothing. Because I can tell you right now, if anybody's in the greater Atlanta area, they're sitting there about to cry because they can't get what they need because the wait list is too long. And if you in Michigan, you crying too.
No,
Yeah,
I know. I mean, we have people on the wait list in New York who still haven't gotten OPWDD.
I know
But
Yeah.
someone in Atlanta that actually had to travel to Chicago to get something done for their autistic child.
yeah, no, I know. I mean, we have people who are moving as much as people complain about the liberal North and how dangerous it is. We have people who are moving up from Florida to New York all the time because the services are so much better. So, but also under IDEA, your kid is supposed to get transitional services, life skills training, transportation training, shopping training, all sorts of training until they're in their 20s. So you are supposed to be fighting for that under your kid's IEP. So that's also a place where you should show up as a parent and make sure in writing that your kid is getting that as well. Like that is under IDEA, that those transitional services are there so that your kid is getting shown how to, well, in our case, learn how to take the subway safely, right? We don't want autistic kids in their own world reading a book. Next thing you know, they fall into and get electrocuted on the third rail, right? We want kids to know how to go to the bodega. And I don't know if you guys know what that is. You know what it is, Ayana.
Corner store.
Yeah, the corner store and get their chopped cheese, get their bagel, get their coffee. We want them to know how to like do their laundry. You guys, again, you all don't need to know how to go to the laundromat and do your laundry. We need our kids to know how to do that, know how to take care of themselves. We can't have our autistic kids going and getting lost in the Bronx. We hear those stories all the time, right? Like a kid walks out of school, gets lost. Next, they're in the East River, God forbid, right? So those are in IDEA. So we have to make sure that our kids are getting those services.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. That's really great information. I've learned something as well. And so, that is about your Andy, about to close. And I just want to thank you again, all the panelists and moderator, Heather and Camille, Ayana and Kenneth, for being here with us today. Thank you for who's watching us either in the Zoom webinar or on YouTube. And so, we just hope that you leave with not just information, but more inspiration and hope, empowerment to, hearing these real stories, real voices, and real tools, to improve your life and your children and the work that you do. Julie and I, again, created this webinar and upcoming documentary because we believe in, that Black autistic people, Black disabled people, our lives matter, and that, our voices must be centered in these conversations, particularly about autism, disability, and justice. So I believe today you have witnessed that and what it means to be autistic out loud, to speak truth to power, to challenge the systems, and to celebrate the identity unapologetically. So if today's conversation moved you, we encourage you to keep going. Again, you will receive the recording and the resources as well to help you further. Also, please go to our Autistic Out Loud social media. Right now, we're on Instagram and YouTube. There, you will get more updates about the actual, documentary. We'll put some recaps of the webinar series as well. So let's continue to, share this webinar as well. so we can continue to uplift the everyday life of Black autistic people. So next week, this is like, again, I said 6-part series. And so the next 4 webinars will be based on access and safety, which is next week at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Then also it will be employment and education. So you hear from other advocates. Some are actors, well-known actors and musicians as well. And then we have the following Wednesday is on um, mental health and mental health and wellness through self-acceptance. So you'll hear again from other advocates. And then the last webinar is going to be on building community and autistic Black joy. And the very last part of the webinar series is you will get to meet the cast, the main subjects of the film. So alongside myself and Juliet, we'll talk more about it. So please, share it. You can sign up through Zoom as well to, for all this webinars. And we'll see you next time, next Wednesday, right here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.